there is a confusion around what does it mean to be audacious. And it doesn't mean that you step in the room and everyone sees you at all. It's got nothing to do with that. Could it encompass that? It certainly can. But when you're truly being your audacious true self, you're stepping into the person who you're supposed to be. So maybe you're a giver. Maybe you like to help others.
Hello and welcome to the Disrupt the Everyday podcast. We're here to help you navigate life while disrupting the status quo. Our discussions cover a number of topics relevant to everyday life. We discuss everything from relationships to entrepreneurship. We also engage in some difficult but important conversations. And now, here are your hosts, Brian and Tanya Hamilton.
Welcome to episode 14 of Disrupt the Everyday. On this episode, we're in discussion with Audley Stephenson, who at the time of this discussion found himself in a position he never thought was even a possibility for him as the commissioner of the National Basketball League of Canada. Since that interview, he's been promoted to the vice president of basketball operations at the National Basketball League of Canada. And in addition to all of that, Audley is a seasoned podcaster and the host of the Audacious Living Podcast. And fittingly, on this episode, we're discussing living audaciously. So let's jump into that conversation. Audley, thanks for joining us today.
Guys, it's an absolute pleasure to be here with you. I always appreciate the opportunity to share and to explore and all these great things that we get to do on these platforms that we have. So thank you. And I think it's awesome. A husband and wife platform podcast. That's very cool too. So yeah, I'm glad to be here.
Well, thank you. And I'll start with the question that everybody wants to know.
Okay.
Who is Audley Stephenson?
Oh boy, he's a complex guy with issues. No. You know what? I am just, first and foremost, I'm a blessed guy. And I say blessed from the standpoint is that I've had an opportunity to do some just cool stuff in life. And I've also had an opportunity to learn from lessons that mistakes that I've made and taken from lessons, and I've grown, and I've always been big into development. I mean, it's funny when you ask that question. I can give you my resume and go, well, here's my professional career and talking on and on and on and on and on. But I don't think that truly defines who the individual is, right? And so for me as an individual, I've always been that person who wanted to give back. I've always been that individual who wanted to help and share and impart with others. I'm in the podcasting space as well. And my podcast very much is about sharing and imparting and garnering insights from different people and exploring various topics of growth and personal development. And that's always been me. I launched my very first podcast in 2007. So now these days, it's like a business card, right? Everyone's got a podcast, which is great. But back then, there weren't a whole lot of podcasts that were happening. And, I was bold enough to try something that was new. I had an opportunity to sit down with it was an NBA podcast, a basketball podcast. And I had an opportunity to sit down with just a bunch of NBA players and talk. And we just had some really powerful conversations around, who they were. Not forget how much points they scored last night or, who they crossed over, who they dunked on. That stuff was irrelevant. It was more about them as individual, their pathway, their journey, how they got to where they got. And so to be able to get those kinds of insights personally helped with my own growth. And so I've just taken all my experience and all that I've done to bring me to this place. And I think most importantly, it just hasn't been about what I've taken from people. It's what I can share with others. And both of you doing this, I'm certain you can understand what the significance in giving back to others. And so that's just me. I'm a father, I'm a husband, I'm a lover of life. And as to quote my podcast, I'm an audacious guy.
There you go. Yeah, audacious. Let's go with that. It's definitely not a word that I know I use very often. And I'm sure other people not so much. So audacious, give us your meaning behind that word.
Yeah, there's a lot behind it because it's very much a manner in which I believe I've lived my life from the onset. So my podcast is called the Audacious Living Podcast. And so for me, the definition is very unique to how I view. And you're right, different people will see and go, well, this is what I think it is, or here's what I feel it is. But to me, being audacious means to be bold, okay? And by being bold, by being audacious, you're being your true self, who you're truly meant to be. Okay. We all have our own individual, we all got our own individual pathway, our lane, that authentic individual who we are. And so for myself, I feel that when you're audacious, you're stepping into yourself and you're stepping into that person that you're supposed to be. And the beautiful thing about being audacious and being bold is that you have the ability to impact and inspire other people. So by me going through my, personal challenges, and, I've had to leave a relationship because it was personally limiting me, right? And I had to find the courage to step out and be bold enough to step away from that. Well, that's a powerful story for someone else who might be going through that exact same thing. So when we talk about audaciousness, as much as it is for me as an individual, it's very much for other people, how we can inspire people to be the person they're supposed to be, how to motivate people to take that first step, to be bold enough, to be courageous enough to launch themselves in the direction that they're supposed to go.
Right. Now, when people hear the term audacious or bold, a lot of people automatically think of someone who's very extroverted. But the way I like the way that you define it, because you're being your true self, and it's possible to be bold or be audacious without necessarily being out there, being the person who's the loudest voice.
That's right. And I think, and I'm glad Brian answered me that point, because there is a confusion around what does it mean to be audacious. It doesn't mean that you step in the room and everyone sees you at all. It's got nothing to do with that. Could it encompass that? It certainly can. But when you're truly being your audacious true self, you're stepping into the person who you're supposed to be. So maybe you're a giver. Maybe you like to help others. Maybe you want to bake a cake for someone's birthday, let's say hypothetically, right? That's just who you are and you're giving. And the beautiful thing about being your bold, audacious self is that you don't need a recognition or validation from other people to do it. You're just being yourself, who you are intended to be. And oftentimes what happens is whether there's fear of judgment, past failures, mistakes, or whatever, we allow those things to limit ourselves and not let us take that step. I was in a conversation one day and someone we're on this sort of topic, and they said, you got to take risks. And I'm like, no, you're not taking a risk by being who you're supposed to be. That's not a risk. That's not a risk at all. A risk is something entirely different. If I'm being bold, and all I'm saying is, I want you to be bold enough to be the person that you're intended to be. And it's an awakening, right? For a lot of people, it's, maybe there's a mask that we've been wearing that we didn't recognize. We're putting on a face for others. Like I said before, there's a fear or a judgment or what other people might think or say. Sometimes, and we've probably all seen this, where, you'll go to someone and say, I've got this great idea. And they'll say, no, well, that's not the right thing to do. Or maybe you should play it safe. Or maybe, you need to take another route or approach. These people are saying these things well-intentioned, like they want the best for us, but it's still limiting us. And that's where I go back to being your bold, audacious self, and I'll even go back because sometimes there's obstacles in our path, right? There's challenges, but we still have to be audacious enough to get past those challenges, whether we go through them, over them, under them, around them. It's important to get past that boulder. So think of a big boulder in your path, right, on the road. You need to get on the other side, because that's where your true greatness lies. I really believe that the other side of obstacles and adversity is the greatness that you're intended to step into.
Okay. Have you always been audacious, or did you have a big boulder in your way?
Well, I think we've all had boulders, right? We've all had that obstacle. And so for me to say that, I've never had a fear, or I've never, judgment hold me back, or that boulder. No, I absolutely have. But that's where the courage comes in. That's where you've got to step past and say, okay, yeah, this is whatever, but I'll give it a shot anyways. You reached out to me. You sent me a message blindly. You had no idea how to respond. You had no idea whether I'd accept. You have no idea whether I'd answer. But yet, you are still bold enough to do so. And now we're in a wonderful conversation, and someone, even if it's just one person, may end up going, wow, I learned something. That was very cool. Or maybe I can use that in my own life. But if you go back, that only happened because you were bold enough to reach out to me. Does that make sense?
Oh no, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
For sure.
I think one thing that I found in life too was early on, and I think a lot of us are like this when we're really young, we don't really have the fears around trying new things. We kind of learn that as we get older. And for me, it took me a while to really get outside of my comfort zone. And I guess I had to get to a point where I was comfortable with being bad at something until I wasn't, in order to improve, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Total sense. And that's where, again, I love to, talk about the comfort zone, because, as comfortable as it is, it's not really the place where we need to be, right? I think we need to be pushing our limits all the time. Life is, there's a term called lifelong learning, right? We're meant to always be learning and always be trying new things and always meant to be experimenting. Well, we can't do those things if we're in our comfort zone, because if we're in our comfort zone, we're not taking any chances. We're not being bold. We're not being courageous. We're not being audacious. So we're actually limiting ourselves by staying in that place. And so, so one of the things I always say is that when I reflect over the period of my life, I look at every major success, every victory, every win. It came as a result of me pushing myself past my comfort zone. It's just a fact of my life, and I'm certain that is the case for many others as well.
In this last year, I have never been as emotionally tired, I don't think, ever. And we have twins, and that first year was crazy. So I guess my question would be, when you're so tired emotionally, physically, how do you keep going?
Yeah, well, for each of us are different. Right? We have to know what we need. We have to know what recharges us. So I'll give you an example. So I have the good fortune and pleasure of being the commissioner of the National Basketball League of Canada. And we can talk later about that backstory and how I got there. But I'll tell you again, it's as a result of me being bold and audacious, right? But so I have the good fortune and pleasure of being the commissioner of this league. I started in this role in 2017. I actually started with the organization back in 2011. But in 2017, I was named the commissioner of the National Basketball League of Canada. It's been an absolute blessing. It's been a joy. It's been a huge part of my life. COVID happens, and all of a sudden it's gone, okay? And for 3 or 4 weeks, I didn't know what to do with myself. Some days I didn't get out of bed. I was just feeling lethargic. I was feeling just kind of low energy. Something was wrong with me. And if you know me, I've always been a high energy, excitable guy. And now I'm behaving very differently. And I didn't know why. I had no clue. I had no indication. I'm just like, I don't feel good. And then over the course of just conversation with people and talking about, what's going on in their lives, I was like, yeah, I don't have basketball. Like COVID shut down sports. I don't have basketball. And I was like, oh, that's what's wrong with me. I don't have the thing that I love. I don't have the thing that gives me energy. I don't have that thing that gets me, inspired to jump out of bed in the morning. That's been stripped away from me. And we all know this because we live this. We didn't get a heads up. We didn't get much of a notice. It was just everything was taken away. And when I realized that, I was like, okay, now I get it. And the acknowledgement thing, and when that light bulb moment is huge, right? Because I get it. And I started to think about, okay, so now that I don't have this, I don't know when it's coming back. What else can I do? What gives me energy? What charges me? And I said, you know what? I'm gonna start a podcast, right? Because those things give me life. Those things give me energy. Yeah, again, the whole sharing and sitting down, talking to people and getting insight. Those things were important to me. And so this is this is actually a cool story, because the very first thing I said to myself, I said, oh, I'll do a podcast. Well, what it'll be about? I don't know. Maybe we'll think about it. And I'm like, yeah, I have the whole idea of being bold. Now, I don't want to call it the Bold Podcast. I want to be audacious. You know what? This is the Audacious Living Podcast. I want to talk to people about being bold. And that was for that self-talk. But the very first thing that came to mind, I was like, yeah, but there's a lot of podcasts out there already. do I need another voice? I'll just clutter. There's tons of podcasts. You know this. You're in the space.
Mhm.
There's tons of podcasts. Why am I going to bother be another one? Right? That's a self-talk and that doubt that comes in. Right? I need to tell my podcast because it's my voice the very same way you need to have yours and talk about disrupting everyday life. Like we all have our individual voices, and as a result, each of our individual voices, there's value in it, right? It's important. So going back to answer your question, it's really finding the things that charge us, finding the things that get you excited, and finding a way to be as close to those things as possible. So as an example, I'll get into my basketball stuff. I wasn't intending on it, but let me get into that because I think there's a linkage there.
Yeah, for sure.
So in 2011, the National Basketball League of Canada had started. Now, prior to that, like I said, I mentioned earlier, I'm doing podcasts. I started a podcast in 2007. We did that for about 4 or 5 years. And then there was an overlap, and all of a sudden NBL Canada started. And I thought, oh, wow, a basketball league. I was always a basketball fan. Why don't I find a way to kind of affiliate myself and get close to it? We all have those people in school that have their whole life plan mapped out. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. That wasn't me, right? But what I did know is that I love the game of basketball. So I found a way to be as close to that as possible. And through that process of being close to the game, it sort of worked itself out. So the game brought me energy. It brought me life. It brought me, this is great. And because of that, great things came out of it. So going back to the question, how do you know? It really goes back to you individual. Do you like walking dogs? Do you like gardening? Do you like crocheting? Do you like baking cookies? Find a way to be as close to those things as possible.
So how did you really get your start in the NBL? And obviously you started in 2011, you became the commissioner in 2017. So what have you been doing in that time?
It was a complete blessing because when I came to NBL Canada, I can 100% tell you that the goal wasn't to be commissioner. I didn't have a goal. I just wanted to be close to the game. And in fact, I didn't even know that the possibility of being commissioner was on the radar. I had no clue. I didn't know, but I did know that I loved the game. Going back to what I was saying earlier, I loved being around the game. So what I had done is I not about podcasting. NBL Canada did have a podcast. So I said, hey, let me podcast for you. And I would interview players. The same blueprint I had just been exercising for the last 3 or 4 years in my own podcast. I brought the same format over and I said, let me do it here for you guys because you don't have it. I'm the only one I can do it for you. They're not going to say no, especially when I'm doing it for free, right? I wasn't trying to get paid. I wasn't looking to draw a paycheck. I just wanted to do something that I thought was really cool. So I started doing it. And, again, and while I'm doing this is generating energy, right? So going back to energy, I'm like, oh, wow, this is great. And people were finding value in it. And then over the course of time, I started to become more of a value to the organization. So I talk a lot to students in sports management programs. And, the number one question is, hey, I want to, work in sports. How do I do that? And I said, well, it really goes back to you as an individual. What is your value and what can you bring to the table that can help other people? Because NBL Canada didn't know that they needed someone to podcast, so I came along, right? They didn't know that. And I didn't really know that either. I figured that out after the fact. It was really, there was certainly a little bit of luck on my part, but, they didn't know that they needed me. And I didn't know that I knew I needed them, but they didn't know they needed me. And so that podcast sort of avenue got me in the front door. And I started working with them. As time went on, I started to become more of a value to the organization. I probably worked for them for 4 years as a volunteer and did not receive a cent. And it was almost like a full-time job. I worked as hard as the people that were salaried. Like I just was that relentless. I was that hungry. But again, because it was bringing me energy, it didn't feel like work. It was a passion of mine, right? So I didn't go, oh my gosh, and oh boy, it wasn't that at all. And through the process of going through this, creating value, I started to work with, I started to learn more. I started to become involved more. The previous commissioners, I was almost like their right-hand guy. And in 2017, the commissioner's name was David Magley, a very good friend of mine. We worked closely together. He taught me lots of stuff, and we're still friends to this day. It was his last year of his contract, and he was negotiating with the board of directors, and the board had said to him, well, what do you need to stay? And he said, you know what? I really think it'd be important if I brought someone on board as a deputy commissioner. Like, there's all these things that need to be done. I want to be able to focus on these things. And, I'd love to be able to have a deputy commissioner that can take this stuff off my plate. And the board said, okay, that's what we'll do. Well, they kind of looked around and they said, okay, first and foremost, who we got. And the president of the board, he came to me and he called me. I'll remember, it was a Friday afternoon. He called me and he said, hey, Audley, there's this opportunity that's come up and we think you would be perfect. And at the time, similar to when I was starting my podcast, I started to doubt myself. I'm like, huh? Like, yeah, commissioner, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, that ain't me. And I'm happy just doing this stuff over here. I don't know. And I brought up all the list of excuses. And it was funny because I could hear him almost rolling his eyes on the phone going, okay, this is what you don't want to do this. Okay. And I remember I said to him, I tell you what, give me the weekend to think about it, and I'll call you on Monday. I'll let you know what my decision is. And he was like, all right, fine, like, whatever. And the moment I hung up the phone, I was like, what are you doing? What are you doing? The opportunity is being handed to you on a silver platter, and you're pushing back on it. Like again, going back to, I talked about my greatest wins and successes. I had to be bold enough and audacious enough to step into my greatness, right? So I remember, I have to beat my head going, you big dummy, big dummy, big dummy. I called him back right away and I said, I'm in. And he was excited and he said, great, we'll get things set up. By the middle of the following week, my good friend, David Magley, who said he needed a deputy commissioner, he accepted a role somewhere else and he left. So I immediately went from deputy commissioner to commissioner in less than a week. And, again, it's as a result of me stepping into my greatness, but I had to be audacious enough to do that.
And you know what? I think everybody, at least once in their lifetime, has had that situation come where somebody sees what they're capable of, but they don't even see it. Right. And the problem is you don't want to miss your opportunity. Right. So good thing you called back that same day, because Monday it could have been gone.
And to your point, I think a lot of people do miss their opportunity, right? A lot of people don't recognize, the inner greatness that lies within them, right? It's almost like they would rather be in there, we talked about earlier, and stay in their comfort zone.
Right.
And that's the killer, because the comfort zone, it kills growth, it makes you stagnant, and it doesn't allow you to step into your greatness.
No, for sure.
Yeah, and it's interesting too. It seems like those calls are always on a Friday. It's always been the case for me, anyways. So,
but you answered, right?
Oh yeah.
There you go.
Now, I kind of want to, just for context as well for everybody, the NBL. I'm just curious to know, where do you find the talent? Where are these guys coming from? What's their background as far as basketball is concerned?
So what's very cool about a league going into its 10th year, and this year we were supposed to celebrate our 10th season, but because of COVID, obviously we've got to put that on hold. But what's really cool is when you do something for 10 years, you kind of develop a bit of a reputation, and you don't have to go out and try and find people anymore. They come to you, which is so awesome. We have 8 teams in our league. We have 4 here in Ontario and then 4 in the Maritimes area. So in Ontario, we've got the Kitchener-Waterloo Titans, we've got the Sudbury 5, we've got the London Lightning, we've got the Windsor Express, and then out east, we've got the Halifax Hurricanes, the Moncton Magic, the Island Storm, and the St. John's Edge, right? It's taken me a while to remember the 8 teams. Glad I got them off in one shot. And so what happens is, so first off, basketball as a sport is huge. It's just globally, it's a phenomenal sport, and more kids are playing. The kind of players that come into our league often are the ones, there's two types. I'll give you both examples. Oftentimes, like if you got a Division One player who had an outstanding, college career, but they're not NBA material, right? Like, at the end of the day, there's 700 or whatever so NBA jobs. A lot of people are going to miss out on them. But you can make a living going overseas as an, right? And there's lots of leagues overseas that you can be a part of. Well, there's a lot of players who would rather not go overseas. For some, it's being away from family and friends, culture, the food, the language. I've heard players even say, no, my phone doesn't work overseas, like, whatever. Well, Canada is a great option in that regard for those types of players, right? Because you're close to home, your family and friends can see it play professionally, and you can still make a decent living. So you've got those types of players that come in our league. The other players that come in our league, and this is one thing, and you would appreciate this in Canada, where oftentimes the goal for top Canadian players, once they finish their high school career, is to go to the States, right? Let's find our way to a D1 school and play professional basketball, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that goal. And I would encourage anyone to chase that dream of that. So, that's what they're after. You think of that. So little Timmy had a great basketball career here in Ontario, goes over to Duke, and he has a great career there. And maybe Timmy has an opportunity to go overseas because he can't make the NBA. And maybe he might go there. Or Timmy might say, well, now that I'm a pro, this is a chance for my family and friends to see me play, right? Because if you go overseas, maybe some families have the wherewithal to travel over there to watch you or whatever and see you play live, but that's not a reality for a lot. So you oftentimes have players whose family and friends have never, ever seen them play professionally. Well, now you can here in Canada. So those are types oftentimes of players. We're a competitive league. We don't have a lot of Shaquille O'Neal type players, but we've got a lot of quick guards, a lot of quick forwards. We're up and down. We score lots of points, lots of dunks, lots of fast breaks, lots of 3-point shooting. Really entertaining game, entertaining style of basketball. So we're quite happy with the product. And like I said, we would be playing 10 years if not for this C word that messed us all up.
As far as the NBL, in terms of kind of the plans moving forward after COVID, I know obviously the 10th anniversary is something that you still want to honor, but what are the plans moving forward?
Still to continue to grow as a league. I mean, there's a great interest in our sport. We want to add more teams. We want to grow. We want to be bigger. We want to be stronger. And we want to be here to stay. Basketball in Canada still is kind of tough because, overall, Canada is, especially at a corporate level, is a hockey country. And I think certainly that gap is shrinking. It's closing. But overall, there's some work still to be done. But as a league, we're quite happy the fact that there's opportunities. So we want to grow and we want to play more basketball. We want to really elevate the sport, give players a platform. We now have a chance for young players to, who I want to be a professional basketball player. They can do it at home, which is just great. So we talked earlier about inspiring and motivating, right? For my son's 14 years old, and if he goes to an NBL of Canada game, he can actually see a Canadian player who grew up here in Canada playing, and that could inspire him to want to do the same.
No, for sure. We have two boys that talk a lot about basketball and have these great dreams, and sure, have at it. So it will be nice to be able to just drive down to Kitchener and check out some games and things and come back up.
Where are you guys looking?
We're in Brantford.
Okay, yeah. So
we have London too. London could be an option.
You're kind of in that middle zone, yeah. Bud Gardens is where the London Lightning play.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Okay, cool. Now, another thing that's important to you that I've heard you talk about is mentorship. So in terms of mentorship, what's your because a lot of people have, again, a lot of different ideas of what mentorship is. I have my own views on it. Similarly to yourself, I'm actually working on a book right now with someone who actually was a mentee to me. We're kind of giving it from both perspectives. But mentorship, what does mentorship mean to you?
I'm curious to hear what you. I don't know. You're asking me the questions, but I'm curious to hear what your thoughts on mentorship are. Actually, what you define it. I'll give you my answer. I'm not holding back here.
Yeah, for sure. No, mentorship from my perspective is, again, and I think there's lots of different types of mentorship, like, whether you're looking formally or informally, where, formally, if you have something kind of mapped out as to how often you're going to meet with your mentee, what the expectations are. There's also those kind of informal mentors, and I leverage informal mentors a lot because they didn't necessarily know they were my mentors. A lot of people are just willing to give you advice, willing to help you out. And, I would take advantage of that. And sometimes it's just the example that they set, being able to learn from that as well. But, I hear people talk about mentors and sponsors and say that they're different things. I think sponsorship is part of mentorship as well. And just for anybody who may not know what that is, it's really just kind of being a champion or an advocate for someone. So, yeah, I think there's a lot to it, but, that's my thoughts on it. What about you?
Very much in agreement, and I'm going to take a little deeper, because I think for me, when we talk about what mentorship is, the foundation is rooted in love, right? Love, wanting the best for someone else, wanting to see someone grow, elevate, and go to another level. At the same time, I also agree with you is that you can have a mentor that doesn't even know that they mentor, right? A mentor can be anyone that's taught you something, that's given you insight, that's shown you a way. And they may not necessarily know that they've done that, but they could have simply have just been audacious in the way they live their life, as an example, right? And they've taught you something. They've inspired you to greatness. UCL, his name John Wooden, is a UCLA legend. Everyone knows, I mean, in the basketball world, he coached Kareem Abdul-Jabbar when he was in college at UCLA. He's got all kinds of records there, wins on top of wins and top of championships. His very last book that he wrote, and he's wrote countless books on leadership and on mentorship and all sorts of things. The very last book he wrote was called A Game Plan for Life. And the book was centered around mentorship. And in that book, he identified, and so he talked about mentorship, but he identified individuals who he mentored. And those individuals talked about what that relationship meant for them. But then John Wooden also identified the people that mentored him. And he identified a list of individuals, but the one that stood out to me, one of the key ones that stood out to me, was Mother Teresa. Someone he never met before, someone he never had any contact, but he talked about how impactful she was on his life and how much direction and guidance that she gave him, and they never had ever met. So, mentorship comes in all forms. You're absolutely correct. There certainly are formal mentor relationships where, once a month, you'll dedicate 1 hour or 2 hours, and we will talk about whether it's career goals or aspirations or life planning or whatever, right? You have those formal mentorship relationships. But then you also have, as to your point, you have the informal ones where, hey, Brian, let's go grab a coffee, let's sit down and chat. You mind if I pick your brain about this or whatever? Like I said before, I have a lot of students who reach out to me that want to talk about even my pathway into sports and how I got to where I got. And I'm more than happy to share, more than happy to pass on insight. Well, that's a form of mentorship at the same time as well, too. So it's always been important to me because, like I said before, the foundation of mentorship is really on the base about love and care for other people. But the other tier of that is the ability and desire to want to share, want to impart, want to take what I have that can help you in some way to assist you on your journey or path.
Yeah, so I'm going to add to that because I haven't been in the corporate world for over 4 years. So mentorship, also, like you guys said, the informal aspect to it, right? So as a mom, somebody who works from home, mentorship is still taking place, and it's a word I've used a lot lately, is being vulnerable. I'm just speaking from the mom side, the wife side. nobody wants to say when they need a little help or guidance, right? But, having coffee with a friend and you're just chatting about both knowing that our kids aren't perfect and, hey, this is what happened to my child at school. This is how I dealt with it. And then informally being in a place to receive their ideas, their suggestions. Hey, like, have you thought of doing it this way? Have you tried this? Right. And then you leave the conversation and you're like, oh my goodness, I never looked at it like that. And now I've just learned, I've picked up a new tool. Now I'm going to go and try it. But whether you're in corporate or whether you're a stay-at-home mom, it's just that word of being vulnerable enough to say, listen, I don't know it all. And you are in a situation. Can you share with me? Right.
And you know what? A lot of people think vulnerability is a bad thing or a weakness. It's not. There's actually strength, right? There's a great deal of strength in saying to someone, I don't know.
Yeah.
I have got no clue. Like, and you think about, like, you go back and when you're a child in school and the teacher said, how many people know this or don't know this? No one's going to put their hand and say, I don't know. Like, that's just not, because we're not necessarily taught vulnerability as being, it's okay, right?
Sure.
It's something you sort of learn as you go through that process of life. But, I think there's great strength. I applaud anyone that says, hey, I have no clue. I don't know. Being vulnerable. I applaud anyone that does that because there's tremendous strength in being able to open up yourself that way.
For sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of just to add to your question that you put to me, I kind of break it down in three ways. And, the foundational pieces, like you said, it's out of love. So I look at the foundational pieces being, I call it the 3 R's. The first R is the relationship. Then there's the responsibility of it, and then being a resource. And I think that's where sponsorship kind of comes into it. But that's how I've kind of structured it and broken it down.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Those are all key elements and important elements. And, again, you can have, whether it's an informal or formal relationship, mentoring relationship, I don't think you really can have an effective one if one of those things aren't there, right? Like, so for example, for those mentors that we don't know or never have an opportunity to meet, the relationship piece may not be there, but that's okay, right? Because they still can be a resource, right? And they still can be of some sort of support to you. So, I think in your 3 R's, they may not all 3 be there, but it's still, aspects of them would exist in some fashion.
Yeah, absolutely.
So on your Instagram page, you post quotes and really good.
I love the way you guys research. That's first off the awesomeness part. I love it. It's amazing.
There you go. So your page is quite positive, which is so great to see, especially these days. One quote that stood out to me, I'm going to read it off. Focus on making yourself better, not thinking that you are better. So expand on that.
So often, and I think we sort of touched on pieces of this already, right? But so often we hold ourselves back from learning or growing. Right? Learning is a form of growth, right? So we hold ourselves back from growing because we're comfortable, right? Hey, I got this. Like, hey, listen, I'm a commissioner of the basketball league. I don't need to go any further. Like, I don't need, that's just, and so that limiting thinking, that limiting belief, that absolutely holds us back, right? There's nothing that says at the end of I'm at the end of my journey, because I'm not, I'm still a young guy, got a whole bunch of gray hairs to grow before my time is up, right? So is it going to be this? Is this all that it is? Absolutely not. There's always more that we can do. There's always another level that we can reach to. There's always something else we can aspire to go to, right? So when we focus on what we have, right, and focus on where we're at, I think we're holding ourselves back. Like, we always can grow. We always can get better. We always can take it to that next level. And so, the quotes are very much, they're important to me because even they're actually great reminders to myself as well. As much as I'm wanting to share and I'm wanting to let people know this is an important thing or, keep in mind and remember, it's actually a good reminder to me as well. Because I'm not perfect. I've got days where I don't feel like doing whatever, or I don't, right? And I have to remind myself that, we're on a journey. We're on a pathway. It doesn't just stop because we don't feel like it, right? The other day I saw, and I don't want to get morbid here, but I saw a quote from Denzel Washington. And he talked about the fact that, if you're working at a company and you could be there for 30 years. And, if you pass away tomorrow, right? Brian, you've seen this, right?
Yeah, I seen this actually the other, I think it was last night, actually.
Right. If you pass away tomorrow, right, 2 or 3 weeks, however long it is, the company's going to post your job and that's it. And they move on, right? Your family and friends are going to miss you. Absolutely. But not that job that you dedicated so much of your life to, it's going to move on. So life is ongoing all the time. We don't stop and chill and go, I'm good, I don't need to do anymore, because there's always room for growth.
Right. I think me and one of my old colleagues, we had this conversation, and he had just asked me, how do I kind of separate, work and family and be able to cut off? Because the job that we were in, there were times where it was really, it went obviously beyond the bounds of the 40-hour week.
Sure.
And it was, there were times where it was just hard to, if you didn't stop, because you're never going to be done at the end of the day, or else you wouldn't be in a job. But there's always something to do. And, what I said to him was, at the end of the day, I'm replaceable to this company, but I'm not replaceable at home.
So important. That's so important. I'm a father. I'm a father myself. I'm a father of 3. I remarried. My partner had 2 kids. Now I became a father of 5, right? And to those 5 kids, we're important. We can't be replaced. They also understand that, their father's, he's out there and he's got these jobs and roles, responsibilities. And, at any point, one of them could walk in here and say, I know you're podcasting, but I want to talk to you or whatever. And so, you got to balance that, right? And
yeah.
Now, having said that, I've already set it up where they know there's no way in hell they're coming to me. This is my time. But the point of the matter is that, and to your point, we aren't replaceable to our loved ones. We have to be there for them at all times. But it's an incredible balance, because we still have to be to ourselves. We still have to make time for ourselves and give the things that we need to replenish us, to strengthen us, to recharge us, to be able to be there for our loved ones. So it's an incredible balance. I struggle with it. I do not have it down pat. It is not perfect. There are times where I'm like, I got too much going on and I got to figure this out. But I'm blessed with just incredible and understanding and patient partner that forgives me often. And I'm not afraid to say, I'm sorry, I messed up. Please forgive me. And she's gracious enough to do that. And, we can move on and enjoy life together. So, but it's a balance. It is, Brian. It's a balance for sure.
Yeah. I've, especially over the last year, been that one who it's all, I think, about how you say it, right? There's been times where in my mind, I'm thinking like, hello, we're upstairs. I'm trying to balance things here with the kids, school and everything. But then, okay, I'm sure there's been times where I vocalized it like that, but then realizing, listen, we got to sort of check again, this balance, like things are coming off kilter here, right? And my biggest thing would be just being aware, and being just always having that in your mind, whether you're the father, you're the mother, that yes, you want to get tasked on for work. Yes, you want to take care of yourself. Yes, you want to make sure the kids are good and your partner's good. Just always being aware where your energy is going, I guess, at the end of the day.
It totally is. And I give both of you a ton of credit. Raising a family, having individual jobs in terms of roles to support the family, and then doing something like a podcast together as well. It is a lot. But I think what happens is in each individual relationship, you try and find that thing that allows you still to give each other energy, right? Mm-hmm. But at the same time, you need to get energy you need to recharge yourselves, right? So I give you a lot of credit, because it's tough. It's tough. Listen, I've gone through divorce, so it's tough. It's not easy. I know the journey, and I understand the value in recharging one another. My partner and I, one of the things that we do is every Monday morning, we take time, and we just pick Monday morning because that was what worked for us. And we actually put it into our calendar so it pops up. And every Monday morning, we take that time to say, here's what I appreciate what you did last week. That's you just, you did this and I really, really like that and it helped me, or I appreciated this, or thanks for checking in on me, or, that meal you made was good, or those flowers you picked up and gave me as a gift, a surprise, is wonderful. Like we're very conscious and deliberate about that. And that's how we recharge one another in this, or one of the ways we recharge one another in this crazy world where there's all sorts of things going on, because at the end, it's our partners who support us, right? As much of a high energy guy as I am, and as much as audacious as I am, and all the wonderful things that I do, there are times where it's not always there. And she's the one that picks me up and reminds me, hey, you're a really great guy, or you're it's very cool. I walked in, my partner was on a conversation with a friend one day, talking on the phone, whatever. And I sort of walked in sort of the tail end, and here she was talking to one of her friends, bragging about her husband's podcast. Oh, he's got this podcast. It's so amazing. And you just felt good. You felt good, right? Because you legitimately have someone there that's got your back, that's in your corner, that's there to support you through thick and thin. And it was just a wonderful feeling. So that's what we got to do for one another as partners.
For sure. No, and also not trying to level up, right? Because we all go through seasons where, hey, when we were first married, I was already in my field. I had finished school and was like working my dream job. Brian wasn't yet. Now here we are, 13 years later, I've gave up my career. I'm working from home. And you know what? I'm good with that, because what's good for him is going to be good for me, and vice versa, right? And not trying to that level up, trying to compete with your partner, because that's not going to get you anywhere either, right? So
it's so amazing. I think the again, that takes a tremendous amount of support for one another, right? And so to do that, first of all, you're clearly in sync and on the same page. That's a starting point. Like, you have to be. You can't have any level of success collectively if you're not unifying. Right. And so that's so amazing, man. And congratulations, 13 years of marriage. It's a big deal.
4 kids later and a dog. I know you have 2.
And so the crazy thing, even with the dogs, they're COVID dogs. So they came in during COVID. So we thought like we had them for years. And I'm not a dog lover. In fact, I avoided dogs. Dogs just weren't my thing. And she wanted a dog, and it started off with, so what happened to trick me? They actually tricked me. They said they wanted a dog. And I'm like, oh, cool. So they brought home the little small dog. It's a Morkie, right? It's a little Morkie. And, I'm kind of getting adjusted to the dog. I'm like, yeah, okay, all right, cool. And then she said, yeah, but this isn't the type of dog I really wanted. I'm going to get the dog. What do you mean this isn't the dog? So we got 2 dogs now? Like, I don't remember agreeing to that. Like, what did I sign up for that? But we got 2 dogs. I'm hooked. I love them to death. We take them for walks, and they're part of our lives now.
Yeah.
Yeah. We have one, and I was the same way for years. It was just like everybody, the kids wanted a dog, and I was just no. Because I know ultimately at the end of the day, it's going to end up being me.
Your dog. You got to do all the work. You got to do the walk. You got to do all the cleaning up. Yeah, I get it.
So when my son was, I guess he would have been still 10 at the time. I was like, okay, I think he's old enough now. And somebody at work was talking about a dog, and I remember I texted Tanya, I'm like, okay, we can get a dog just randomly out of nowhere, right? So we got this dog, but I'm still not a dog person. I like this dog. I tell people I'm not a dog person. I'm a my dog person, but don't let your dog think your dog's gonna climb all over me and lick me. Like, I don't let my own dog lick my face. So
yeah. I got my boundaries. Like, look, I like my dogs, but I'm not kissing them.
Yeah.
My dogs, I ain't kissing them, but teach their own. And I'm not judging anybody that does that. It's great.
Oh, not at all.
It's just not.
Yep.
Can't do it.
Oh man. Well, as we wrap up here, I want to give you an opportunity to just kind of talk about everything that you're doing and everything that is on the horizon. I know you obviously you have the podcast. Just share with us.
Well, first and foremost, thank you again for doing this. Again, I just think there's great value in just being able to share and even have conversations such as this. I mean, it's impactful, it's meaningful, and listen, if just one listener walks away going, oh, that was kind of cool, or oh, that's different, that's interesting, then I think congratulations to all of us, right? Because I think that's also important. And so I congratulate you and thank you again. And little old me thinking I can add value to your platform. I humbly say thank you for asking me to be here. I think overall, I continue to sort of live my life on this, again, this, I call it the audacious way of living, right? It's just kind of how I do it. And the podcast, I'm glad I started the podcast because it does a bunch of things, right? Like, so again, let's go back to what I was talking about earlier, right? So if I wasn't bold enough to say, forget all the fact that there's all these other podcasts out there, and I'm adding to the clutter, adding to the noise, and adding to the confusion, right? And I fought through that, and I still went ahead and did my podcast, we wouldn't be having this conversation today. And it's been so, I've so much appreciated talking to the two of you, and it's meant so much. I'm gonna be energized and charged for the rest of the day, right?
Same.
But this wouldn't have happened if I didn't take that step forward, like going back to how important that is. So, that's just kind of the journey I'm gonna continue to be on, encourage others to do that. I think in my description, I call myself the encourager of audaciousness, right? Like, I think it's so important that we all do that. And if I can help someone, or I can motivate someone, or inspire someone to do that, then that's exactly what I'll continue to do. So, again, my feed will continue to be positive. It'll still have quotes, it'll have nice videos. Sometimes I'll get on and talk about a few things, or I'll share stuff from my podcast. That's never going to change. That's just who I am. We talk about living authentically and being your true self. That's I think I was looking the other day, and I think I had 7,000 posts on my feed. Well, if you go through every single one of them, I'm telling you, that's the stuff you're just going to see. This is kind of what it is. That's who I am. That's who I've always been. And that's not going to change. And so that's going to continue. The podcast will go, I don't know, until I find another something else to jump on. But what I told myself is that I'm going to start this podcast. At the very minimum, I'm going to do 100 episodes. And at the end of 100 episodes, I'll reevaluate. Let's see where I'm at that point, right? Let's see what's going on. So I'm going to do my math. I've got 79 more to go before I start to evaluate. And whether I continues on or I do something else, that's fine. But I think the important thing is that I continue to do my part. And, people talk about putting into the universe, right? I'm going to continue to do that and continue to share just the same way that you folks are. And I think it's important that we all do that to make this world a better place. We know about all the crazy stuff that are happening. Even put aside COVID, because COVID is not going to last forever. We still live in a society where people don't trust each other. We certainly know what all the social injustices that are going on. We want the hatred, trying to put people down to elevate themselves. All these things are happening. And I'm reflecting on a post I recently posted where I talked about, if the 4 things that we can do in individually that we can do to make this world a better place is that we can extend grace, right? So it's demonstrate compassion by extending grace to one another. We can be kind to each other, demonstrate kindness, because that doesn't cost anything. We can show love. We talked earlier about mentorship and the foundation of that being love. We can show love to one another. And then the 4th one, because it's very much in line with my brand, is going to be audacious, right? Mm-hmm. I truly feel that if we do those things and we focus on those things, whichever order you want to do them, and if you want to call himself something else, you don't have to use the word audacious. You can call it bold, you can call it courageous, you can call it whatever it is. But as long as those elements permeate through your actions and are impacting others on a daily basis, then we're on the right path as a society. So that's really my goal. When we're allowed to play basketball again, NBL of Canada will hit the courts. By all means, if you're ever in the Kitchener area or down in London, let me know. We can sit down courtside and watch a game. I'd be happy to have you as my guest. But yeah, we're waiting for basketball to come back. We're waiting for the world to come back to normal. In the meantime, I'm just going to continue to do what I've been doing.
Awesome. And if you'd be happy to have us as your guest courtside, I'd be happy to let you. So we'll definitely make that happen.
So would our 4 children. We have 4 though.
Bring on down.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Audley. Appreciate your time and appreciate the message and the conversation.
You guys have been awesome. Like I said, you've got me recharged for the rest of the day. I'm going to be bouncing off the walls. My wife will be like, what's wrong with you? I'm like, oh my gosh. So thank you. You've given me as much as I've given to you.
Thanks for listening to the Disrupt the Everyday podcast. For more ways to listen, connect with us on social media. To be a guest or to partner with us, check out our link tree at Disrupt the Everyday. Join us next time for more ways to disrupt the everyday.
Audaciously.